Hello, everyone. This is the October 7th edition of the April 4th Coalition show. I have Michael Wilbur with me, and we're going to struggle through. We don't have our beautiful helpers today. You know, we're on our own, so we're going to struggle through this. We're just going to remember poverty's the enemy. All this anger everybody has with each other in this country, the anger should be at poverty. Let's get rid of poverty, and I think the rest of the anger will disappear. But we're the April 4th Coalition, and it's October 7th, and this is the first anniversary since the tragedy or the awful attack upon the people of Israel last year on October 7th that killed more people since the Holocaust. But then ensuing a whole year of bombing and killing, and you know, we advocate peace and nonviolent resolutions to problems. You know, we call ourselves the April 4th Coalition because April 4th was the anniversary of Martin Luther King's assassination, and we want to carry on his work. Our mission statement is we are for workers' rights and collective bargaining rights, and we are against tax breaks for the rich and corporations who ship our jobs overseas. We are dedicated to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but we always emphasize on our show Article 23, and I'll do Section 1, and Mike will do Section 2, I'll do Section 3, and Mike will do Section 4. So I'll start us off. Everyone has the right to work, to free choice of employment, to just and favorable conditions of work, and protection against unemployment.
No, my turn.
Yeah, number
That's
two.
Number 2, everyone, without any discrimination, has the right to equal pay for equal work.
Number 3, everyone who works has the right to just and favorable remuneration, ensuring for him or herself and his or her family an existence worthy of human dignity and supplemented, if necessary, by other means of social protection.
Number 4, everyone has the right to form and join trade unions for the protection of his and her interests.
Well, Mike, I thought we'd start off the show. We have an old friend that we use a lot, is Dr. Robert Reich.
Okay.
And he was the Secretary of Labor in the Clinton administration. But like we're against tax breaks for the rich, what his 4-minute spiel is going to be about the Trump tax cuts. So let's hear what Robert Reich has to say about the Trump tax cuts.
The Trump tax cuts were a huge scam. But this November, we have a chance to end this trickle-down hoax once and for all. Donald Trump's biggest legislative achievement, if you even want to call it that, was the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. The law permanently slashed corporate taxes and temporarily cut income taxes, mostly for rich individuals, through the year 2025. The results were worse than I could have imagined. Trump and his officials claimed the tax cuts would lead to corporations hiring more workers and would very conservatively lead to a $4,000 boost in household incomes.
AT&T plans to increase U.S. capital spending $1 billion and provide $1,000 special bonus to more than 200,000 U.S. employees, and that's because of what we did.
What actually happened in the years since? In AT&T's case, the company saw its overall federal tax bill drop by 81%. It spent 31 times more on dividends and stock buybacks to enrich wealthy shareholders than it paid in taxes. Meanwhile, it slashed over 40,000 jobs. That was par for the course with Trump's tax cuts. Like AT&T, America's biggest corporations didn't use their tax savings to increase productivity or reward workers. Instead, they increased their stock buybacks and dividends. Many of them, including AT&T, even ended up paying their executives more in some years than what they paid Uncle Sam. Those executives, along with other high earners, then got to keep more of their earnings because Trump's tax cuts for individuals were heavily skewed toward the rich. The lowest earners, they got squat. And many middle-income families saw their taxes go up. And those supposed $4,000 raises, Did you get one? The bottom line is that Trump's tax law fueled a massive transfer of wealth into the hands of the rich and powerful. Corporate profits have skyrocketed. U.S. billionaire wealth has more than doubled since 2018. The tax cuts have also added $2 trillion to the national debt so far. But that hasn't stopped Trump and the so-called party of fiscal responsibility from doubling down on renewing them.
You're rich as hell. We're going to give you tax cuts?
If Trump is reelected and Republicans take control of Congress, they're planning to renew the expiring tax cuts for individuals that primarily benefited the rich. This would cost $4.6 trillion over the next decade, more than double the cost of the original tax cuts. Trump has also threatened to lower the corporate tax rate even further, from 21% to 15%, which would cost another $1 trillion. It's trickle-down economics on steroids. All of this would cause the federal deficit and debt to soar, which Republicans will then use as an excuse to cut spending on government programs the rest of us rely on. But the Democrats have their own tax plan, and we can make it a reality this November. What would it do? Just the opposite. One, it would increase taxes on wealthy individuals with incomes in excess of $400,000 a year, while cutting taxes for lower-income Americans. Two, it would make billionaires pay at least 25% of their income in taxes, still leaving them with plenty left over. Three, it would raise the corporate income tax to 28%, which is about what it was in 1990. Lastly, it would quadruple the tax on stock buybacks to get corporations to invest more of their earnings in workers' wages and productivity instead of windfalls for investors. So the real choice is between the Republicans' plan to make the rich much richer and the Democrats' plan to make the rich pay their fair share and provide what Americans need. Which do you want?
Thank you, Robert. He always has a good way of spelling it out. I mean, we have it in our mission statement. We're against tax breaks for the rich in corporations who ship our jobs overseas, and that's exactly who Trump wants to give the tax cut, has given the tax cuts to, and wants to do again in the future. They call it trickle-down.
Waste of time.
Trickle-down economics. And you know, it started with Ronald Reagan, the trickle-down economics in the 1980s. And that's when I started as a mailman in 1984. And when I first was out delivering mail, especially on Church Street, I can remember those brick buildings not far from the library. They were beautiful homes. And there were lawyers in there, and they were really nice homes for people. But all of a sudden, we set down this trickle-down economics. And you look now, over 40 years later, the bricks are falling apart. The buildings are completely empty. They're almost to the point where they have to be condemned. That's what I believe trickle-down economics did for our community and for our country. But, you know, we're arguing about tax policy. But this election is about a lot more than this. I mean, if it was about tax policy, you wouldn't see Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney, people that are lifelong Republicans, you wouldn't see them endorsing the Democratic nominee for president if this election was about tax policy. The real thing about this election is the person and the Republican nominee is untrustworthy. He's already shown it. He has no belief in democracy. So they won't even accept the fact that he lost the last election. He's a poor loser. I mean, we used to call it sore loser, a little kid in the playground. If he doesn't get his way, he's taking my ball and I'm going home. Except that he threatened people's lives because he didn't get his way. So we have a video right now. It's from the Democracy Docket, and I'm trying to remember the man's name. Apologize right now. He's an attorney. He represented the Biden administration in the last election. When Biden won by, I think, 7 million votes in the popular vote, but he through the Electoral College, which gives the advantage to the minority of people. He did win in the Electoral College too, but Trump would not accept it. Go back to 2016 when Hillary Clinton won the popular vote but lost in the Electoral College. What do you think Donald Trump would have done if he won the popular vote but lost the Electoral College? You think he would have accepted that? He does not accept losing. And that's what makes him dangerous. And that's why Liz Cheney, Dick Cheney, and a lot of other Republicans, people that work for him, say he's not trustworthy. Let's hear what I think is Mark Elias from the Democracy Docket has to say about the last presidential debate, which ended with the statement about not believing the results of the last election. Let's hear what Mark Elias has to say.
J.D. Vance doubles down on election denialism in the vice presidential debate. Welcome to Democracy Docket. I'm Mark Elias.
And I'm Paige Moskowitz. Let's get started.
You know, Paige, the big news of the day as we come out of the vice presidential debate is that for approximately an hour and a half, J.D. Vance was able to conceal from the American people who he was. You know, he was able to pretend that he was this reasonable Midwestern, guy from Ohio. And then the one question that he can't duck and dodge and hide from finally came up towards the end of the debate, and the real J.D. Vance came out. Let's show the video.
This was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
Has she?
And that exchange followed Norah O'Donnell asking J.D. Vance if he would challenge the results of the election, even if every single governor in the country certified their state's results. And he gave, again, a non-answer. He said there were a lot of problems in the 2020 election. They should be debated. We should discuss them. But he didn't say he would respect the results of the election if every state could agree that their election results were fairly certified.
And that's because, Paige, within the Republican Party, there is room for variance on opinions on a lot of things. You can be pro-free trade, you can be pro-tariff, you can want to limit tariffs, you can have different positions even on abortion nowadays. But the one thing that Donald Trump won't allow, the one thing that is like a bridge too far for the Republican faithful, is to acknowledge the thing that we all know to be true, which is that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. He lost by 7 million votes in the popular vote, and he lost the states of Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Nevada, and Arizona. Those were the 6 states that he contested after the election. They are the 6 states that his supporters in Congress tried to, prevent the certification. And Paige, they are the basis upon which the violent insurrection in the nation's capital on January 6th took place. And the fact that here we are, just weeks before the next election, and J.D. Vance is not just unable to say that Donald Trump lost, but he also had quite an explanation for the role that Donald Trump played in January of 2021.
Right. During the debate, J.D. Vance said it's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January the 20th. Now, Tim Walz made it very clear we're not talking about January 20th. We're talking about January 6th, when there was an insurrection on the Capitol that Donald Trump helped incite. And J.D. Vance kind of, locked down on that Republican line of Donald Trump told people to peacefully protest, peacefully register their dissent. But we know that's not what happened. We have the film and the photos of people barging into the Capitol. We've seen the photos of congressional leaders cowering in office, fearing for their safety. It was a violent insurrection, and Donald Trump played a role in that. And no matter how much J.D. Vance wants to ignore it, we know the truth of what happened that day.
Yeah, I mean, Paige, I'm curious your take on this, because I couldn't tell if what he was saying was, January 6th was no big deal, or January 6th was a big deal, but Donald Trump, wanted everything to be peaceful. Or what that quote you point out seems to say is, well, let's give him credit. He didn't start another violent insurrection on the 20th. I mean, like I'm trying to, like, it's almost like he's giving a temporal limitation. Like, let's give Donald Trump credit for on January 20th, not again instituting a violent insurrection. And by the way, as you recall, Paige, Donald Trump didn't even bother showing up to the inauguration, which is not exactly the vote of confidence for supporting the peaceful transfer of power.
Right. It's kind of a threatening sentiment to be like Donald Trump could have done something on January 20th, but he chose not to. He left the White House. And again, that doesn't really instill confidence that this is a man we would want to have a second term in office, to once again sit in the White House and be the chief leader of the United States. It really feels like JD Vance was trying to be like, it could have been so much worse than it actually was. One of the things I found really interesting last night during the debate was when JD Vance was talking about abortion and leaving it up to the states. He said time and time again, this is an issue where we've lost the trust of the people, right? He brought up trust again and again, that the Republicans have lost people's trust when it comes to abortion and that they need to regain voters' trust. But it was only about abortion where he said that. He didn't say it about elections. He didn't say it about democracy. He didn't acknowledge any of the damage that the Republican parties have done to people's faith in free and fair elections. Only the abortion issue, where it has been made very clear that voters do not like the Republican Party's stance on it. Even a lot of Republican voters don't like the GOP's stance on abortion. So they can recognize where they messed up on abortion and say they need to regain people's trust, but they can't recognize it on elections and democracy.
Yeah, Paige, that's because when it comes to the elections, they want to sow distrust. He can say we've lost trust on these other things, but part of their electoral strategy for this election is to sow distrust, is to make people not trust the outcome of elections, because Donald Trump is committed to election denialism, and the entire Republican Party is committed to election denialism. And JD Vance has to mouth election denialism. So let's pivot to where this puts us as we now record this episode, in the wake of this debate. And we are now facing, a little more than a month of a campaign for Election Day, but voting has begun. People are getting their ballots. And, what is the message that people are hearing when they read that, JD Vance thinks that Donald Trump didn't lose the election or is unwilling to say otherwise, and he is, whitewashing it, and the entire Republican Party is defending it today. They're defending that position. And, I worry that it is not just that we are setting the stage for Donald Trump to again contest the election in court after this go around, but that there really won't even be the Republican assurances that, Donald Trump will concede if he loses. Remember after 2020, there was a lot of people who said, look, he needs a little time to process this. Maybe he'll file some court cases, but he will eventually come around to the right thing. And it seems to me that the Republican Party, by that answer and their reaction to it, is just sort of setting the stage that if Donald Trump loses, he will never concede the election, and they will never concede the election. Like, there will never be a concession, no matter what the outcome.
I think you're right, because we've heard Republican leaders say that time and time again. This wasn't the first time JD Vance would ask if he would challenge the results of this election if he and Donald Trump lose. Remember, he was asked a couple weeks ago what he would have done if he was vice president on January 6, 2021. And he said he would have asked states to send alternative slates of electors. We've heard from leaders like Mike Johnson say things like, we'll accept the results of the election if it's free and fair, but then never, explain what they mean by free and fair. Is it free and fair if Kamala Harris wins and Donald Trump loses, or is it only free and fair if their side wins?
Yeah, look, I think the answer with Speaker Mike Johnson is we know what he means. I mean, he was given several opportunities to clarify that. I wrote a piece for Democracy Docket a few months ago saying that Speaker Johnson was the elected Republican, other than Donald Trump, most responsible for the events of January 6th. And nothing that has come out of his mouth since then has contradicted that assessment or has suggested it'll be any different in 2024. And I do want to make sure that if you have not been keeping up with Democracy Docket, you make sure you are signed up to their free daily and weekly newsletters. The link is in the show notes. You get a ton of really important information about what is happening around all of these issues and in court. And the other thing that did not come out of J.D. Vance's mouth, which I thought was a glaring omission, and I would have liked to see the moderators follow up on this, is why was J.D. Vance on the stage? You know, wasn't there some other guy who was once the vice presidential nominee along with Donald Trump?
Right. Tim Walz was the one to bring that up. He said, you know, Mike Pence certified the election, and that's why Mike Pence isn't on the stage, right? Mike Pence was cast away by not only Donald Trump, but really the Republican establishment for certifying the election and doing what he was supposed to do in Congress on January 6th. The Republican Party has made it clear they don't have room for people who think that the 2020 election was fair. You can only be, you know, a standard issue Republican if you're saying that the election was stolen, and everything that happened on January 6th in order to certify the election and to ensure that Joe Biden could take power on January 20th was a traitorous act to the GOP.
Yeah, and look, the fact is that Mike Pence, you know, is a rock rib conservative. You know, Mike Pence is, you know, much more pro-life than Donald Trump, and more pro-life, honestly, than J.D. Vance professed to be last night, although I don't believe J.D. Vance. He has been an orthodox doctrinaire Republican on every issue that Republicans care about, from top of their agenda to the bottom, through his entire career. He was loyal to Donald Trump on every issue. I mean, during the height of Donald Trump's craziness about COVID, he was loyal to him. During Donald Trump's craziness about international policy and foreign affairs and domestic policy, like, you know, Mike Pence was like leading the cult cheers for Donald Trump. And yet when he did the one thing that he was required to do under the US Constitution, they chanted to hang him. Donald Trump didn't defend him. He vilified him. And as you point out, the Republican Party has completely ostracized him. And that is the state of the Republican Party today. And so when you see J.D. Vance mouthing words that make no sense about the certification in 2020, when you see him dodging and weaving, and when you see him unable to answer a decent person in Tim Walz's honest reaction to hearing his answer, that is because J.D. Vance, who is no dummy, he was a political opportunist, but he's not a dumb man. He knows that that's the one red line left in the Republican Party. He has to continue to be an election denier from start to finish. And as we head towards the final weeks of this campaign, every voter needs to keep that in mind. Thank you all for joining this episode of Democracy Docket. Please make sure you're subscribed to its free daily and weekly newsletters. We'll see you next time.
Well, thank you, Mark Elias. I really like that Democracy Docket. I think it's very informative. You can go to democracydocket.com and get all live updates. They have educational panels that you can view, and I just highly recommend it. But what's clear is that we have a really smart group of people that are going to try to defend democracy against the Republicans' blatant disregard for who wins the election. They're just going to try to rig it, steal it, whatever they can. And what they do is they accuse others of stealing when really that's what they're all about. So we can't do anything about that. We got the lawyers that are there to do that. But what we can do as voters is make sure that we vote. A lot of people I've heard, this is a really close election. But the reason why it's so close, the danger is not that people who like Kamala Harris or the Democratic Party or those issues, labor issues, all the issues for abortion rights, education, all those issues, the problem is they might stay home. They might be lazy, you know, not vote. In 2016, there were a lot of people that saw no chance in the world for Donald Trump to win. So a lot of people just didn't bother to vote. Oh, I don't have to wait. They make it hard to vote in some places, But you've got to make that effort. We're lucky here in Massachusetts, it's pretty easy. What you have to do is, though, you check your registration beforehand. If you're not registered, register. Make a plan to vote. In voting by mail, in Massachusetts, you can vote by mail. You can go in and vote early. You know, tell your friends and family you're voting. Do not be intimidated by people. Set your reminders to vote. And, you know, support those people who are poll workers because they're doing a great job. So we're on the topic of voting. Today is October 7th. You can go right down today and vote. There's an issue on Greylock School. It's a referendum to override the final pitch for new school. We're voting here in North Adams on whether to increase the tax rate to pay for Greylock Elementary School. So you can vote for or against it, but if you're interested either way, you should get up off your couch and go out and vote. You can vote today, or you go out tomorrow, the polls will be open, and register your vote. Don't complain after it's over. Go and vote. Vote on this issue. And then there are other things that you can vote for in this next election. We got to make sure that we vote for our representatives in Congress and for our representatives in the State House. And also there are ballot questions. We'll take another show and we'll go over all the ballot questions. There's a couple that have to do with labor issues. You know, question 5 is the minimum wage for tipped workers, gradually increasing the minimum wage for tipped workers that work in restaurants or whatever to finally reach what the minimum wage is and to let them live a life of dignity. There's a question 1 is about whether the auditor should audit the state legislature, but that's something that will be decided probably by the courts and not by the voters because it's one's a part of the administrative, the governor's. It's a statewide election of part of the executive branch, and the other is the legislative branch, and they claim that they have autonomy. So the courts will probably go. Question 2 is about eliminating the Massachusetts comprehensive assessment exams that are required for graduation. The people are asking, or the teachers are asking for you to vote that down. They don't want to force kids to take tests. They want them to learn, but they don't want to have these high stakes tests, which cause a lot of anxiety. And then number 3 is unionization for transportation network drivers. If approved, the question would enable rideshare drivers to form unions and collectively bargain with Uber, Lyft, and similar businesses. The companies want the drivers to serve as independent contractors. I think I have an idea where we stand on that. I think we are for collective bargaining rights and union rights.
Oh, yeah.
And then number 4 is legalization and regulation of certain psychedelic substances. I'm not going to get into that one, but I think magic mushrooms, they want people to be able to eat magic mushrooms in their own home, but we'll talk about those later. But so we're getting down to the wire. I think it's, if I'm right, we only have 10 seconds left, Mike. I really tore through this. But what else do we always say? Power to the people.
To the people. Always.